Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar tonight on publishing a great book review. Tonight's workshop is developed and presented by Devon Lee. Devon is a content editor with the SLIS Student Research Journal, also known as SRJ or SRJ. The journal is based at the iSchool here at San Jose State University and published its 11th issue this past June of 2016. We'll also be joined tonight by the journal's faculty advisor, Dr. Anthony Bernier, and I'm Tamara Calkin, Editor-in-Chief for the Student Research Journal. I won't take up too much time here. Just a quick housekeeping note for those of you tuning in live tonight that there will be designated times for Q&A. So if you could please hold your questions until prompted by our presenter. If you have any technical issues, go ahead and type in the chat box and Carolyn or I will be happy to assist you. Okay, so Devon, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Tamara. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Student Research Journal's tutorial on writing book reviews. Thanks for all tuning in tonight. My name is Devon. I'm a content editor for the journal, and I'll be talking about the process of publishing a great review. So we'll start off with a quick introduction for those of you not familiar with the journal. The journal, or SRJ, is the iSchool student-governed, peer-reviewed, open-access journal. This means our editing, management, marketing is all done by students at the iSchool. Articles submitted to the journal go through a peer review by our editors, and once published are available to readers all over the world. Like Tamara said, the journal was founded in 2010 and now has a total of 11 published issues. And this year we started accepting book reviews. The journal is overseen by the iSchool faculty here at San Jose State, and you'll get a chance to meet our faculty advisor, Dr. Bernier, later in this webinar. SRJ accepts manuscripts from graduate students from programs across the country. Our published articles encompass a range of topics, including genealogy, metadata, social tagging, archives, and information management. That's just to name a few. You've probably heard this term double-blind peer review a lot, but what does it mean exactly? It means that you, the reviewer, don't know who is editing your manuscript, and the editors don't know whose work they're working on. This ensures that our editors read submissions objectively and without bias. The double-blind peer review process is the standard for high-quality scholarly journals. So the goal of the journal is to promote graduate scholarship and inquiry. And you can read our past issues at the link in the chat box. Great, thanks, Tamara. Book reviews are a recent addition to the journal, and we're all very excited about it. So why should you submit a review? Yes, it takes time to carefully read a book and write up a review, but it's a rare opportunity to have your opinion published. When you write a review, you're staying up to date on industry trends and also contributing to the larger scholarly conversation. So think of this as your chance to get your name and your ideas out there. So in this tutorial, we're going to talk about how to evaluate the components of a nonfiction book, how to analyze the qualities of a successful review and apply these characteristics to your own work, and how to describe a book's contribution to its field. Our goal tonight is for you to come away with a better understanding of the expectations and the review process of the journal. So by the end of the session, you should be more familiar with what we're looking from you and also be ready to start your own review. So first, let's start by talking about how you go about choosing a book to review. SRJ is accepting reviews of books on topics including library and information science, and also archives and records management. Browsing through our published issues is a great way to get a sense of the range of topics that our authors have focused on. And the best place to get started is by finding a topic that interests you. Just keep in mind that the book you review should be a scholarly work on a topic that's related to information science, libraries, archives, and records management, and has also been published within the last 3 years. So to get a better idea of the types of books to review, you can check out our journal policies and the suggested titles list, and the link to these will be in the chat box. Let's say you have a book in mind, but you want to make sure someone else hasn't already submitted a review. Well, if you're attending the webinar live tonight, you really don't have to worry. The journal has just started accepting reviews, and we haven't published any yet. But further down the road, if you're concerned someone else has already reviewed your book of choice, check the journal's archives first. But keep in mind, you can still submit your review even if another student's review is being processed. Your review will go through the same peer review process, and who knows, maybe it will be selected for publication. But if you have any doubts about submitting your review, reach out to us at the email address here. If all of this is starting to remind you of a review assignment that you wrote for a class at the iSchool, you should consider submitting it to the Student Research Journal. Past assignments like literature reviews are another great place to get started because you've already laid the foundation for a good book review or two while preparing a lit review. So again, if you've analyzed the book for class and it meets the requirements here, you're already off to a great start. So in this section of the webinar, we'll focus on the process of putting together a book review for submission. It's a pretty straightforward process, and since we're all graduate students here, we are experienced writing reports and familiar with the basic components of academic writing. The difference between these types of documents and a book review is the review is a condensed summary of the text and your response to it. We want to know what you thought of the author's argument. So we'll go through the layout of a book review, and we'll talk about how to make it cohesive and efficient. So this chart is a breakdown of a review. Starting at the top, begin by introducing your reader to the book. Who is the author? What are the author's credentials? What's the subject? And who would find this book useful or interesting? Next, offer some background information so your reader can place the book into context. This puts the book into a bigger discussion, like library management or archival techniques, for example. And this is how you fill the first third of your review. The body is where you summarize the book and the author's argument. You can discuss the organization of the book and how this supports the flow of the argument. You can also introduce subtopics here as well. The final third of the review is the evaluation section. This is where we want your voice to shine through. In this section in particular, it's important that you clearly distinguish your words from those of the author. In your concluding remarks, state if you think that the book achieved what it set out to do. Were there any questions left unanswered? As you can see from the structure of the review, the bulk of the text describes the book to your reader. But that doesn't mean this section can be dry and unengaging. Rather, the book summary should build up to your evaluation in the concluding paragraph. And here's where you want to take that extra step to show your understanding of the book and how it contributes to its field. So remember, your summary answers the question, what is this book about? And your evaluation answers the question, so what? And finally, make sure you include a citation of the book. So we need to take a step back first in order to answer the questions we discussed in the previous slide. You need to read strategically. This includes identifying the author's main argument and keeping track of it as the book progresses. As you analyze a nonfiction book, it's a good idea to keep an eye out for the items on this slide. These will help you evaluate the book and set it into context. So we'll start with the author. What makes the author or editor an expert on their topic? Is their interest in the topic academic or practical? What's their writing style? Is their tone appropriate for the subject and their audience? These questions are a good starting point to help you make sense of the author and their goals. So moving on to the content of the book, you should ask yourself, what's the subject? Is it an introductory text, or is it an in-depth analysis? And also, what is the purpose of the book? For example, is your book a practical overview of conservation techniques for industry professionals, or a survey of learning trends in the presence of social media? Depending on the purpose of the book, you will need to answer how it meets its goal. It's also important to consider how the book contributes to its field. For example, the book on conservation techniques contributes with applicable real-world solutions to conservation challenges. The book on teaching with social media, on the other hand, contributes to the field of education by keeping instructors up to date on teaching methodologies and trends. You can tell a lot about a book if you can answer the question, who is it written for? The book's audience will influence the author's tone, the terminology used, and the types of examples to support their argument. Additionally, pay attention to features that would make the book useful to its intended audience. For example, you could say the library management book that includes case studies would be useful for an audience looking for real-world solutions to apply to their own library. These aspects of a book are important to think about, and you'll also be analyzing the author's arguments. So you should ask yourself, what are the strengths? Can you detect any weaknesses? And when considering flow, you want to ask yourself, are the author's steps to the conclusion logical? Basically, does the author back up their argument, and how? So that was a lot of information. I'll stop here and ask if there are any questions so far. Okay, great. We'll keep going. So now that you have an idea of what to look for as you read, we'll move on to the writing of the review. First, what makes a book review successful? Accurate description of the book's content is important, but even more so is the reviewer's analysis. Your analysis as a reviewer is your value assessment. So do you agree with the author? Do you agree with our argument? Do you think the book would be a good resource on this topic? The editors will be looking at how you discuss the book's contribution to its field. And since we've been using this phrase a lot, let's break it down a little bit. Contributing to the field asks why a piece of writing matters. You've probably encountered this question in assignments like a literature review. So when answering the question, how does the book contribute to its field, you're basically asking, why should people care about this book? And you can answer it in a variety of ways depending on the topic, the audience, and your field of study. So a quick example, if you've taken Info 202 recently, you probably got familiar with Dr. Tucker's book, Information Retrieval Systems Design, Practices and Principles. So let's say you're writing a review of the book. We could start off by describing the book's subject and the credentials of the author. And this is a good start, but we've only just scratched the surface. A good review goes a step beyond summary to ask, why is this book important? So here we have to stop and consider other factors like audience. So who benefits from this book? Is it geared towards students or practitioners? And what and who does the book aim to teach? So these are the types of questions that would help us answer why this book is important to the field of information management. So now the big question, how do you write a successful book review? One of the key differences between an acceptable review and an exceptional review is its level of analysis. It's easy to restate the author's arguments and just leave it at that. But a strong review contributes new insights, analyzing what we know about a topic and hypothesizing on future research or solutions. This extra step in the writing process is what Dr. Bernier calls escape velocity. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Anthony Bernier. Dr. Bernier is a professor at the iSchool at San Jose State. He is also our faculty advisor for the journal and was a key player in getting the book review project off the ground. So we're very lucky to have him as a speaker for this session. And Anthony, if you're all set, I'll pass the mic over to you.
I am all set, Devon, and thank you very much. And what a great start to our presentation this evening. Hi, everyone. I am Anthony Bernier. I'm a teacher at the school. My area of focus generally in research is on youth studies, but I'm also an instructor for two of our research methods classes. One of them is, of course, in youth studies research methods, and the other is a course that I teach because I'm a historian on historical research methods. So I teach in that area too. This notion of reaching escape velocity is a term, of course, that we borrow from another field. It's the term that I use to describe an essay that I published in the very first issue of the journal back in 2011. And what I'm trying to do with that notion is trying to suggest that essay, by the way, is entirely about how to construct a very thorough, systematic literature review. But it has a lot in common with book reviews. And what it has in common is that using the term gravity in that essay, I'm trying to make an analogy between the term gravity, the normal, everyday flow of where information is and assumptions and current thinking, with the current literature on something. So if we're talking about Dr. Tucker's book, for instance, in this case, her book would be looking at what she's saying, what she is viewing as the important stuff, and that's the gravity. And you want, it's an important piece of information in a book review to properly characterize the author's own argument, the answer, the thesis to the question that that book is answering for the field. And you've got to be able to get that accurately, and you've got to be able to distinguish that in a very faithful way, presenting the author's actual case, the answer that they're bringing to the field to advance it, from your own voice. And do you distinguish that, or the gravity, from what you're bringing forward, which is the introduction of a gap that was missed or not discussed significantly, a critique of something that you feel was overemphasized or not emphasized enough, a big piece of missing experience that would have helped change or will help further the field in the future when it's treated next time, or some new technical thing, something that's changed that, for instance, in this case, Dr. Tucker may have not seen yet or has not been even around when she was writing her book. And so you are introducing your critique, which helps you reach escape velocity from the gravitational pull that you're pulling away from. But here again, you want to be sure that your voice is distinguished from the author so that we're not confusing who said what, and making sure that we're clear on the critique that you're bringing. So I refer to that notion, and earlier Devon was talking about answering the question, so what? And that's an important question to ask when you're reading any book. Why is this valuable to the field? How is it going to help me in practice? As a student, how do I feel about it? But it's also looking at what the author is saying at the beginning, which is their notion, their analysis of the problem that they're facing. And that's the notion of kind of what's going on. And I want to throw yet another metaphor into the mix. And that's the notion of a cocktail party. When you arrive at a cocktail party or a party of another kind, you will see a variety of people gathered in various configurations around the space, and you will see someone you know or someone you want to meet, and you saddle up to that group. And before you begin to engage discussion with that group, you want to find out what people are talking about, what topics, who's a strong advocate of what, and then you begin to wade into the conversation with your own opinion and your own experience. And that's really what we're doing here. It's also what happens in a literature review, where you are marking out what the literature is saying first in a very faithful way to the authors that you're dealing with, or the party people that you're attending. And then you begin to introduce your own topic, your own contribution. And that's the cocktail party analogy. Either way, the point is still the same, that when you're entering into a piece of analytical scholarly work, you want to be faithful and be respectful of what has been presented, analyze what it's been saying, make sure you hit the core question that is being asked by the author, the core problem they're dealing with, and the answer that they're bringing. And then you add on to that the kind of criteria that you're looking for in terms of what's next, what was overemphasized, what was missed. Before I sign off, I want to also suggest a one step back and taking a look at the SRJ, the journal in whole. The journal is representative of one piece of the iSchool's overall strategic plan in terms of trying to deepen and broaden the experience that students have at the master's level with research. And the journal is one piece of that. The faculty have the Center for Innovation and Research on another piece. We've got our doctoral program, the Gateway PhD program, that we combine with the Queensland University of Technology in Australia, And we have a number of other pieces too that we put into play over the last several years. But the journal is a part of that. And whether you're a member of the editorial team, as Devon and Gina and Tamrak are, or whether you are submitting a manuscript for an article, or now whether you're submitting a manuscript for a book review, you're all participating in the growth and development and deepening of the school's experience with real research. So that is what I had to say about that, and I will stand by for a second for any questions, and then I will turn it back over to Devon. Go ahead, Heather.
I was just wondering for a moment if you could clarify gravity and I think what was the other side of that, everyday flow?
I'll clarify that. Thank you for that question. I think it's wonderful that in library school we're talking about defining gravity. Gravity, by gravity I meant the material that we are looking at to review, and the analysis that's coming from that, sort of what we're currently accepting through this book or a literature review of a variety of books or articles that are trying to define what is current and present about the field, what's accepted currently. And then the escape velocity is the other side, where you begin to pull away from that and bring your own creativity, your own new questions, your own analysis. But it's important to distinguish between those two things. So in a book review, you're documenting and summarizing and detailing what the author is advancing as the sort of problem or question that they're dealing with, and what their answer is. That would be gravity for that book. And then the escape velocity piece is when you begin to pull away, begin to get some distance on it, ask questions about the future, ask questions about gaps that you see, ask questions about what might be done next. And Heather, is that okay? And if it is, your mic's still on. Stop.
Okay.
Go ahead, Julie, and Heather, your mic's still on.
Hi, I was just wondering if, I know that these reviews are appearing in an academic journal, but would you think that the tone of a book review would be a little more informal than the articles in the journal might be? And I guess I'm thinking the reason behind that might just be because a book review is more subjective. And I guess I'm also just thinking of, say, the New York Times. You know, the book review section is written with a little more humor at times, and it just seems more conversational than the rest of the newspaper. And I'm wondering if you think that informality would be appropriate in this case or not.
That's a good question, Julie. I will offer my suggestion and then see if anyone on the editorial team wants to weigh in as well. First of all, I think primarily it's important to distinguish between the New York Times, which is a popular, I don't want to call it pedestrian, but it's a newspaper. It's not an academic voice. And so humor is obviously important. That sly humor, dry humor. I enjoy it too, but it's not scholarly. And a lot of times you'll find, in fact, almost all those cases, a lot of those books are going to be novels or fiction, and so we're not doing that. And second, this is a scholarly exercise, and part of it is to help you become familiar with the process of getting peer-reviewed, and that would require more of a serious voice, and especially because we're dealing with library science or archival studies or records management materials. The humor part is a little bit hard for me to get to, but so I'm going to stop there, and those are my thoughts. But I think the editorial team, who will be the ultimate arbiters of the peer review process, should weigh in now. So.
Julie, I don't actually have a lot to add to what Anthony said. I think that you hit the nail on the head as far as I think the genre of a book review is inherently very different from that of, say, a literature review or research, which is a lot of what SRJ publishes. So there are going to be some tonal difference inherent, I guess. But again, yeah, probably not. I have to confess, I'm not actually familiar with the book review section of the New York Times. That's very much across the continent from me, but probably a different tone. Again, I will give Devon a chance to weigh in because I know she has spent a lot of time with the book review components, obviously, in developing this workshop. And then I'm also just going to point out that we do have another question in the chat box after that. So Devon, I'm going to let you take over, and if you want to weigh in and maybe read out Angie's question as well.
Sure, I'll try to answer both questions at the same time. First, Angie's question is, once we have a manuscript or book review written, what is the best way to prepare it for submission? So I think both the questions can be answered by talking a little bit about tone. We'll be looking at some review examples, and they're definitely not the most entertaining pieces of writing out there, but I mean, the basic point is kind of what Anthony covered, is to get your ideas out there, and you're just doing it in a little bit of a different arena with the academic publication. So just being aware of your audience is another thing. For the academic journal, we have been saying that our readership is mainly scholarly, so just keep that in mind when you're preparing a piece you've already written and you're thinking about submitting it to the journal, that it's not going to be someone who's sitting down reading the Sunday paper, picking up and looking at the review. It's going to be probably an academic, a student, or even someone in the industry looking to see what other people who are knowledgeable in the field thought about a recent publication. I hope that answers your question. Oops, let's see. Tamara, go ahead.
Thanks, Devon. I just wanted to weigh in on Angie's question as well, and it looks like Anthony's going to jump in behind me, which is great. Yeah, Angie, about preparing a manuscript or book review, I am going to share a link in the chat box that goes straight to the style guide page of our website for the journal. But I would encourage anyone interested to check out not just the style guide, but also the aims and scope of the journal, because this is a really good place to start. I actually really thank you for bringing this up, Angie, is the, what exactly is SRJ looking for? So like any assignment or any other journal you're going to submit to, it is definitely good to check out what it is that the journal is looking for. And you can do that partly by reviewing the archives. It's not a huge website, so if you go and visit scholarworks.sjsu.edu/SLIS SRJ, you're going to find out what the journal's about and what we're looking for, and the nitty-gritty of preparation is going to be in the style guide as far as format, length, and what we follow in the APA style guide. I'm going to turn off my mic now and let Anthony jump in.
Hi, thanks. I wanted to add just one more thing before I go silent myself, and that is in the process of developing your own literature reviews, you are typically covering a particular topic. That topic happens to be an LIS topic, as you might well imagine it is, either in a 200 class or the management course or even the 285. You can use references to other books that have appeared in your literature review as part of the broader context, the reference background that you're putting this new book into. That's a very good way, actually, of strengthening your argument that this book has made an advance because of these other books that you've also looked at, or these other articles and arguments that you've examined. So I wanted to suggest that just because you're reviewing one book, that doesn't mean that might be the only book you make reference to in a book review. And you can very profitably refer to 2 or 3 or 4 others that help distinguish what this particular book is doing or trying to do, and then you go on from there into your own escape velocity. But that's all I really have, and I'm going to go radio silent now, and I'll let you appreciate the rest of the presentation. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Anthony. You've always got such great advice for us. Okay, so I guess we're moving on to part 2, which will talk more about reviewing specifically for the journal. So now that you're familiar with the concept of escape velocity, we'll demonstrate some of these points we've been discussing so far by looking at some book review examples. The first example is a review of the book Better Library and Learning Space, Projects, Trends, and Ideas, edited by Les Watson. The Journal of Librarianship and Information Science published this review, and it's actually on the longer side at 1,500 words. The reviewer, Kate Latimer, is from Queen's University Belfast in the UK. So what can we learn from this review? We'll start by breaking it down into its 6 paragraphs. So starting with paragraph 1, I don't expect you to read this, so don't worry about it. But this is where you'll find the contextual information that sets the book into a broader discussion. In this case, the conversation is about the modern library. Specifically, do physical libraries fit into our digital age? The reviewer also cites previous scholarship to support this section of the review. And you can see some of the questions she chooses to highlight really help pique the reader's interest and outline some of the topics covered by the book. And these questions are, what makes a good library? And what does good learning space look like? In the second paragraph, the reviewer evaluates the book's editor. Some questions you can ask yourself are, what makes this person qualified to write, or in this case, edit, this book? And also, why should I trust their opinion? So the reviewer answers these questions with a brief summary of the editor, Watson's, achievement in the library world. In paragraphs 3, 4, and 5, she looked at the book's structure. The book itself is divided into 3 sections, each of which is discussed in the following paragraphs. So together, these paragraphs give a summary of the book's 200, 300 pages. So here she points out some of the strengths of the first part of the book. And this is really helpful for the reader to get a sense of who is presenting the ideas found in the book. In paragraph 4, the reviewer analyzes part 2 of the book and further highlights the book's questions and significance. And next she evaluates the editor's choice of contributors. And this is actually pretty interesting because according to the reviewer, these professionals were selected for their diverse backgrounds to provide a range of advice, which is one of the book's strengths. She also identifies the trend of user-centered design, which is found throughout the contributors' work. And finally, we come to the evaluation paragraph. Here she analyzes how successfully the book answers its initial research questions. She also evaluates the evidence presented in the book, and the evidence here was case studies and also outside sources. So you can see in the text in bold that the reviewer found the case studies were helpful, but the sources in the book could have been expanded. And this is an important point to note as you're reading. You may need to do some outside research. So does the book provide you with enough resources? And are the resources of high quality? So just keep these questions in the back of your mind as you conduct your own review. Overall, you can see the reviewer found this book useful. And she concludes her review by recommending the book to anyone who is working on updating the image of their library. The second example is by Matt Cook. His review of the Library Innovation Toolkit was published in Reference and User Services Quarterly last year. The reviewer is the Emerging Technologies Librarian at the University of Oklahoma Libraries. So like the first example, this book is a compilation of essays on an aspect of the library as a space for growth. The review starts off strong by outlining the book's topic, its organization, and the overarching theme, which is the micro-macrocosm. And we'll see this theme addressed in the next paragraph. So here the reviewer restates the theme and also points out some of the book's strengths, specifically how the book discusses the idea of innovation and its effects on 2 levels. 1, the individual, and 2, the organization as a whole. And this would be helpful for a reader to assess the scope of the book's contents. Next, the reviewer focuses on the different viewpoints represented in the book. Here there are also direct quotes which help the reader get a sense of the voices of the contributing authors. And finally, the review concludes with some comments on specific case studies in the text, as well as a reflection of the value of the book as a whole. So now we're going to go back through this review and see if there are any areas that could use some revision. So you'll recall in the first review example, Kate Latimer clearly stated that the credentials of the book's editors and writers. In the first example, we understood that the contributing authors came from a range of backgrounds, and this was a conscious choice by the editor to give readers a broad and diverse collection of opinions. In this review, however, we don't have any details about the contributing authors, which makes it really difficult for us as readers to judge the reliability of the text up front. Take a look at the last sentence in this second paragraph. It says, the Library Innovation Toolkit excels in this regard. It approaches innovation from both the individual level and the organizational level to effectively communicate the value of forward thinking at all levels. The statement in this paragraph is central to the review. Remember, you are summarizing the text for potential readers, and a statement like this helps your readers understand the value of the book. So knowing the text addresses innovation on both the individual and organizational level helps the reader judge if the book is a good fit for their information needs or not. So moving on to paragraph 3. In the opening paragraph, remember the reviewer mentions the micro and macrocosm theme. Here he talks about how this chapter addresses the macro scale of library innovation, meaning the higher organizational level of a library system. Looking back at the previous paragraph, though, it would have been useful to explicitly state that the given example here in paragraph 2 represents the microcosm theme of the book. So if you decide to use direct quotes, be sure to cite your source, and we'll go over some APA guidelines in the next section of the presentation. Oops, sorry about that. Let's take a look at the concluding paragraph first. It's very helpful that the reviewer highlights specific case studies that the reader may find useful. However, the concluding statement in this review is not altogether clear. So if you want to take a look at that, it reads, respectively, this book club on a commuter ferry ride and the transition of a public library into a cavern-like exploratory space represent first a mindset defined by openness and then an embrace by higher-level information professionals. So when we see a statement like this, some typical feedback could be clear or be concise. You want to have a strong finish to your review. The statement here is a very high-level summary, but it may be confusing to some readers. The final statement of your review is often where your readers decide if the book is worth their time or not. So bottom line, reviews are short, and you want to be efficient with your narrative. So as you can see from these examples, there are certain pieces that make a review informative and also easy to follow. For more examples of book reviews, check out our resource links. We have publications like the Library Journal and Library Quarterly that have dedicated review sections, and you can search them online. And I believe that links will be provided in a PDF link at the very end of this session. In this segment of the webinar, we'll show you how to apply the strengths of a successful review to your own work. Keep in mind the following requirements are specific to the Student Research Journal at San Jose State. So like Tamara said, if you're planning to submit your review to another publication, please be sure to check their submission guidelines. They might be quite different. The basic requirements for submitting a review to this journal are outlined here. You can tell by the word count that the book review can be relatively short, meaning you need to be concise and also efficient with your review. This might be a challenge. It's a balancing act to pack enough details while also keeping the big picture in mind. Additionally, our editors expect you to have proofread your work before submitting it. You should also make sure the book and references have been properly cited in APA style. This is an easy step to overlook, but proper citations play a significant role in making your work credible. An example of APA formatting is shown here. One thing to note is the state, if it's published in the US, it's been abbreviated. And Purdue's online writing lab is a great source for APA guidelines. So moving on to the content of the review, we'll go through each of these just to make sure the journal's expectations are clear. The first point addresses how you, the reviewer, has picked out the author's core question. A core question asks who, what, where, when, why, and how. So it's important to identify this early on so you can pull supporting evidence and structure your review. The second point refers to the book's context within its field. Think of this section like a literature review. Here you should demonstrate your understanding of larger trends and also your book's relation to other sources. Stating the strengths and weaknesses. This is important to consider when discussing the accessibility of the book's content. So some questions to ask would be, who is the book written for? And does the book successfully relate to this particular audience? Are there any weaknesses that would make the content inaccessible to non-experts? These are the types of questions you can ask as you read through. If you are having trouble identifying the audience, ask yourself if you, as a student, find the content readable. If you've been struggling through the text and need outside resources to make sense of the topic, the book may be better suited to someone with a deeper knowledge of the subject. And you should note this in the audience section of your review. Proper use of terminology is a point that the editors are on the lookout for. It's one thing to quote technical terms, but quite another to use them correctly in your own writing. So this boils down to making sure that you understand the meaning of the term. And further, you should be able to communicate your understanding of terminology in the context in which it was used. The last point, voice. This is another aspect that our editing team looks at closely. It's important to distinguish your ideas from those of the source. Use your own words to analyze the author's points and also establish yourself as the reviewer. Keep in mind your audience. This is a scholarly piece, so you don't need to say, I think this, or I found that the book said this. But basically, don't write it for the editors alone. Yes, the journal editors will read it first, but more importantly, you're writing for the journal's readers. Who are our readers? Our readers are academics, graduate students, professors, and they also may be industry professionals. So our readership is broad, and don't be afraid to use those industry-specific terms. Just be sure to define them. Okay, so before we wrap up, let's revisit the goals of the webinar. You should be familiar with the components of a nonfiction book review and how to analyze the qualities of a successful review and apply them to your own review. Also, how to describe a book's contribution to its field. So I hope you have a better understanding of the expectations and the review process of the journal. If you have any questions about the submission process, feel free to reach out to us. I hope this overview was helpful, and before we open up the discussion for questions, just thank you again for your interest in the Research Journal, and we're looking forward to reading your book reviews. So if while you're thinking of any questions we can answer for you, the link to our resource document is here. Tamara just posted it in the chat box. If you have any questions, go ahead and grab the mic or enter them in the chat box. Thanks.
So just while people
Yes,
are
Anna,
just while people are gathering their thoughts, if there are questions, I do want to confirm that yes, this session has been recorded and will be shared via the Journal's YouTube channel. And if you're attending the iSchool, you can expect that you will find a link in both our social media and a number of other places. So if you're looking, you will be able to find the recording, yes.
So if anyone's wondering about deadlines, the journal accepts submissions throughout the year. So you may have seen the call for submission in an email. Just keep in mind that our issues are published in spring and fall. So that typically means May and December, January. Also, if you're wondering how long it's going to take you to write a review, there are some things to consider. First, just how long the book is, how dense the topic is, and also if you need to do further research on the topic to write a great review. Just note-taking styles. If you've already read the book for the assignment, you might be way ahead of the game. The writing editing process, personally I give myself a week and then a day off in between the editing sessions, but it depends on how much time you have. So once you've calculated all that time in, you need to factor in the journal review stage as well, which may be at least a week or two. I don't know, Tamara or Gina, can you address that?
Sorry, Devon, I was also monitoring the chat box. You said how long for the review on our end, is it?
Yes.
It is really going to depend on what the queue looks like. I think a couple of weeks is probably a pretty optimistic turnaround time from submission. So from submission, it does go through a process. It has a pre-review sort of before it will get to the editors, but you're right that our editors do have about a 2-week window to get their review back to the managing editor. So yeah, Gina is typing 60 to 75 days average sounds about right. Now book reviews may prove to be a bit faster since they are a shorter submission than what we deal with in most of our manuscripts, but it's always good to give yourself some time and some breathing room. But as you said, it's a rolling basis and we publish twice annually, so the process is ongoing.
Great, thanks Tamara. Are there any other questions we can answer for you? Okay, well if you think of any in the next couple of weeks or before you write your review, our contact email is on the reference sheet. It's also in this slide. So thanks again to everyone here tonight. I think we'll be hanging around for another 10 minutes or so if you have any last minute questions or comments. Otherwise, we hope to see some of your reviews coming through, and we'll stop the recording, let you go. So thanks everyone, have a good night.